John,
Ola,
I'm
how are you?
back.
How are you? We missed you.
I missed you too, as a matter of fact, but it's great to be back.
Now, wait a minute, though. You're back, but you're not really back. Where are you right now?
I am in Singapore.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks so much for making the time. I know it's got to be late or early. What is it?
It's a little late. I think it's 12 hours after you. So
All
it's
right,
just
good.
evening instead of morning.
All right, good. Well, awesome. This is going to be great. And we've got a great show today. We're super excited. I mean, I don't know about you, but probably the number one topic this year that everyone's been talking about, even now ISG, is generative AI. And it's a pretty exciting topic. Still early, right? But we've got a great speaker today, great guest, the CEO of Hexaware, which I'm super excited about. And Shakrisha Ramakan is going to come join us, and he's known better as Keish. And it's going to be a great show.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Threat or thrive? Let's see what he has to say.
We'll find out. We'll find out. Keish, how are you?
Hey, John. Hey, Ola. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Listen, before we get things going, because we've got a great topic today, generative AI, how it impacts employees, threat or thrive, as Ola talked about. I think we should take a moment to celebrate something spectacular. I mean, you've got a little over 18,000 employees in India. And yesterday was a pretty historical day, not for just India, but basically the globe. So maybe we can show that picture right now. I just think that is spectacular. So congratulations to all your employees and the entire population of India on landing on the moon. Really spectacular.
Every Indian, anywhere, everywhere in the world feels that they've contributed to it and feel proud about it. So,
I'm
That's
sure.
wonderful.
Yeah, that's
That's
great.
wonderful. Well, let's get to the topic at hand here. Generative AI, big topic, still early. Lots going on. One of the big things, though, that's happening that we're seeing, and we'd love to get your perspective on it, is the impact on employees. We're seeing some things in America with some strikes going on right now, with some concerns about generative AI and how that's going to impact writers. Threat or thrive, is this topic. Gen Zs, there's a great article. We'll put the link in there for the full article. HRD talks about Gen Zers. 46% of them are excited about generative AI. 36% of millennials, and then only 20% of Gen X and 16% of baby boomers. What are you seeing in the marketplace? What are your thoughts around how this is going to have a positive impact, or what the threat might be in employees?
there is um, a question of what will be the impact and then when will it happen. Okay. So, my aggregate view of everything said and done is that in the medium term, short to medium term, and I don't know how long that'll be, 2 years, 3 years, I actually think we will see a net increase in employment before the productivity benefits start coming down. So the model is this, okay? Think of a single enterprise. Let's pretend that they deploy it and then start getting productivity with a lag, which is what will happen. But the deployment is going to take time, effort, and money, which is actually going to increase dollars. Now, we don't know how those dollars will get split amongst the various constituents, but it's going to be increased dollars. And with a lag of maybe a year, 6 months to a year, there's some productivity benefit. But it is preceded by a bump. And I think this, in aggregate, this bump for everyone will last a while, will last 3 years before the aggregate kind of bump starts getting overtaken by the aggregate reduction. So, there's parallels, right? When internet started, what are the first things that happened? That everybody was setting up networks and and servers. So companies like Cisco and Dell and HP, they saw booms.
Yeah.
And once it got fully deployed, then there's the different genre of companies that saw the value from it. Think Netflix or Meta, or that's once it is fully deployed. But first, there is a cost and effort of deployment. So I think in the medium term, there's actually going to be an increase in employment.
Keish, that idea of the parallels that we can draw is a really good one. One of the things I'm thinking of is, when we first started seeing organizations move to microservice architectures and they started moving things to the cloud, they didn't put a lot of governance around it. And so what ended up happening was this, because it was essentially somewhat democratized, it wasn't democratized probably to the extent that generative AI is, but still within IT organizations, it was democratized. So what you got with this was this real broad sprawl, and I'm being nice to call it a sprawl and not a mess. But a lot of what organizations are doing today is trying to put first governance in place to try to stem it, but then they're also trying to go back and optimize the mess that got created. Do you see the same thing potentially happening in the AI space, where we see lots of organizations, I wouldn't say organizations, individuals who are going out and doing things in their environments that at some point maybe organizations need to pull back or control a little bit beyond just what's happening today, which is just sort of proliferation?
So, I'll say two things that maybe counter each other, right? I think organizations have learned from their experience of cloud and, everybody going out and doing their own thing before anybody realized how much of money they were spending on cloud. I think there is going to be the magnitude of concerns with Gen AI, and the implications are potentially even higher. So I think there is more effort to put in guardrails up front, and there's more policies that are already out there, banning employees from doing it. Yet, it's very hard to do. How do you, like the European regulators said, hey, you have to describe what decisions you're making with AI. And how do you do that? If you use Google every day, you're already using
every day. Yeah, you're already using it.
So yeah, I think there will be some of that of trying to clean up afterwards, but people are trying to get ahead of it and establishing controls up front.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, I think too is to your point about this lift in workload, the workers, like the work to be done, it's just different work. So as you think about kind of the transition of like even your employee base or your clients and how they're thinking about it, before the internet, right? There were engineers and they were doing amazing work and it was focused on a specific area. And then with the internet, all of a sudden, that work changed. There was different programming languages, et cetera, but the workforce exploded, from a standpoint of growth. Is there going to be that growth, to your point? Is it different work? And then as we get to those benefits kind of come over the top, will it just be that next lift of the next thing? And we won't even know what that is right now. We couldn't even talk about it because a year or 18 months from now, 24 months from now, there'll be that next thing, and that'll be the new level of work. How are you thinking about that?
For sure, it is different work, right? And if you take software programming, somebody made an interesting comment, right? That the hottest new programming language is English. So it is different work for sure. And to your point, by the time this curve starts coming down, will there be another bump? Highly likely. That's what history has shown us, that there will be another bump that we don't know what it is that will come. But just this one, for sure, it's different work. But I do think that, there is a generation of people, and you earlier referred to some of the differences across age groups, that will kind of fully embrace, much like there's a generation that has fully embraced using phones as, extension of their body. I think kind of there's a generation that will learn to speak, to do everything, speak to program and speak to draw images and make movies and write stories. So I think it'll become integral to the workforce sooner than we imagine.
Yeah.
Amazingly, the article you were talking about, John, said that 63% of Gen Zers are expecting or maybe already using Gen AI. So they're not just thinking or dreaming about it. They're stepping into it and doing it. And I know your workforce is a lot of youth in your workforce. Are you stepping into it with them? Are you helping them step into it? I mean, how are you dealing with what have got to be a lot of highly creative people, and you don't want to stop them from being highly creative and using new capabilities and new tools, right, and new technologies? How are you looking at that as an organization?
Yeah. See, our goal is to become, in tech services, the company that has the highest GenAI IQ in the world. Okay. And that for that to happen, every single employee in the company in the world needs to be trained, but trained is a passive term, needs to learn, right? It's an active process on a daily basis, because by the time you create training content, it's already obsolete. So that's why I'm saying it's not just training, right?
Yeah.
And every single employee concept has to start with me, right? So me, my leadership team, all of us are currently undergoing training and certification as a proof of learning. And I think we have, like, as of now, like 8.5, 9,000 employees that are registered to finish a first level training by September. And our goal is to get that to 15,000 by end of this year and finish everyone else by Q1 next year. So it has to be mass, because the value is not in like a handful of people thinking about what are the best use of this. The value is if every single employee is thinking on a daily basis. And like I said earlier, has become fluent in speaking to get whatever they're writing and speaking to whatever they want to get done.
Yeah. How do you think about all that investment? And then I know we got to meet a while back and in Stanford, and I was super impressed. I'll never forget. I mean, your retention is incredible. So you obviously the talent and being able to keep the talent. How will this impact that? If you're going to train all these amazing people, how do you keep them engaged with your firm and keep those numbers up? Because again, that's a hard area for firms to do, right?
See, there is a short-term view and a longer-term view. Okay, short-term, I think it's a negative for us in that I think we will drain talent too, because our people become easy kind of, places to go and hire from. But in the long term, if Hexaware is known as a brand for employees, that it's a great place. You know what? You get the best access to training. You get to learn the latest,
Yeah.
greatest. Not just learn, but have client work that is associated with that. I think it's okay. Um, I think that's a great spot for us to be in, if that's how we are perceived as a brand.
Yeah. I think it's hard for firms, Ola, right? If you think about, we're always so pressurized from a stock market perspective, is that our clients, that are publicly traded, they can't afford the short-term investment to get the long-term gain because they have to report that next quarter. So it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate this hiccup here, right?
True, true.
I think the second thing,
We have the benefit of being private, but we don't operate like that. We still operate like we're a public company and demonstrate growth and revenue and profit every single quarter.
but I'm sure you also will have the pressure, as we've seen, with customers who are expecting
Yeah.
some, I call it magical lift in your productivity because there's Gen AI now. So I've heard, 90% of what you do, Keech, can now all be generated through Gen AI. So shouldn't I be paying you less? I mean, are you starting to even hear that or contemplate that? Just the response to businesses who are now looking at, I have to call it the hype. It's not all hype, but I will kind of express it that way, and are starting to sort of scratch their heads and say, what does this mean for me in terms of what I might be paying for from a service provider like yourself? Because of course they're not thinking of the investment you're making in order to ensure that you can use those capabilities on their behalf. How do you start to contemplate that?
So I think for sure there is going to be, and even right now, and certainly I think will explode in 24, an impact on pricing. Okay. Yet, before I talk about that, I just want to kind of maybe say two things to help moderate how we think about this, right? how much percentage of a software developer's time, software engineer's time, actually goes into writing code? Now, it varies. I think in a service provider like us, it could be 30, 40%. But if they work for an end user enterprise who are working a lot with their businesses, it could be like as low as 10%. Okay.
Yeah.
And because people are not writing code, they are building a system. Okay. And GenAI can't build a system yet, at least. Now, for sure, we don't know what capabilities lies ahead. It is expected to have a smooth exponential increase in capabilities for a while. So I'm talking current capabilities. Okay.
Mhm.
And in one area which for sure is going to get impacted is software development and testing. But that's the kind of counter view. How much time is actually spent in code? Okay. Notwithstanding that, on your question all on pricing, okay, I think there are going to be kind of maybe three broad types of models that emerge. I think on operations and run services that have traditionally been on managed services models, I think you're going to see starting now. It's like the automation, service providers, without knowing kind of quite how much we can save from it, we're willing to take a little bit of a forward punt and price those into deals. I think that's going to happen now.
Mm.
And you're going to see the same, some will get burnt and service providers will get burnt. Some clients will feel like they didn't get enough. That we'll know 3 to 5 years from now, right? But I think see those being priced now. On project work, especially around software development, I think a lot of clients are going to say, hey, let me kind of do this, and I will keep the benefit of productivity because a lot of it is on T&M.
Right.
The whole other dimension to this is what are the cost of that productivity, right?
Yeah.
So there's a cost of deployment. There's a cost of the license, and the price per token looks like not something cents, but you multiply that by a few billions, it's still a substantial amount of money. So how do you think about the cost of AI, right? And at least as far as I'm concerned, when automation started, right, and the same issue, right, there's a benefit and what are the cost of automation. Philosophically, I told my company, let's treat the cost of automation as zero. And it's not quite that, but that's what it's going to get to asymptotically, right? And my thinking in GenAI is similar. Ignore the cost, because if you think about what are the cost of making productivity happen and weigh that against the productivity and want to make an ROI, you will arrive at the wrong decision because this cost is going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of making that happen. The productivity will only go up. So if you kind of do a static analysis, you're going to make a wrong decision. So my direction, my thing is, hey, think of the cost as going close to zero, because it'll reduce dramatically. It won't go to zero, but it'll reduce dramatically.
Yeah.
So what you'll be really left with is the productivity. And like I said, I think you'll start seeing it into pricing right now. Certainly.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. And when you think about kind of where you're going to start to apply this with your client base, what we're seeing, and again, we'll share the link from our post on LinkedIn from 2 days ago. Financial services, manufacturing, healthcare are all the top areas right now where we're seeing generative AI stories beginning. What are your thoughts? Is that an area that you're seeing a similar trend, or are you seeing it in other parts of your business, other parts of your client base?
So financial services, let me start there. I think that industry is the one most likely to build private everything, right?
Yeah.
so when they finally use it, the value will be larger and at greater scale. But that initial deployment cost is going to be much bigger and lengthier in term, right? And so I think a lot of them are going to say, hey, I want to build kind of, I want to use the capability of LLMs, but it has to be my data and not kind of going out anywhere, right? And there is a range there, right? As you're saying, hey, you can do that with, I'm going to expose OpenAI capabilities in a private instance, but I think we all already know that capability of OpenAI in that private instance lags several generations potentially of the actual OpenAI instance. So that's, I think, going to be the predominant model in financial services, and yet clearly they have the most to gain. But they will maybe take a little bit more time because they will go through the spiral model, but the value will be the biggest for them. On we say manufacturing, it has many subsegments. I actually think any consumer-oriented business is likely to see a plethora of adoption in the front more so than in the back in terms of productivity. If you think of all the growth ideas or growth that could get better targeting, better customer segmentation, all of that, or content. They're doing a lot of marketing and they're spending a lot on content.
Yeah.
Cost of content could go to zero.
Yeah.
So it literally could go to zero. So it's the cost of saying a few words.
Yeah.
So I think their consumer-oriented industries could see the first level of adoption. I'm sorry, what are the third? Healthcare.
Healthcare, yeah.
So I think healthcare is more likely also to do what financial services do, and probably even more so the need for privacy in their data, right? And so they're more likely to go the way of building large-scale private models. And a lot of the companies have the ability to afford those investments that is needed. And I don't think anyone today can put a number on what it takes, but in general, the sense is that they can afford to make those.
Ola, what are your thoughts on what our clients? I mean, we've got now people calling in to us at ISG to help understand. I mean, look, it is a global sourcing, advisory firm. That's what we do. How are we advising or discussing this with clients? I think this privacy component is a key component, right? Because if you spend all this time making this LLM, you don't kind of want to share it with the rest of the world. What are we seeing from our client base?
I think we've got some clients, and I love the way, Keech, the way you characterized it, because I do think that the financial services sector in particular, as well as what we see happening in the consumer services is probably the one that leans in the easiest because, frankly, it's content generation. So in a sense, they're not giving a lot away. But I think what a lot of organizations are coming to us about is more about their employees' use of public LLMs and inadvertently introducing private or sensitive data into those completely inadvertently, simply by the way that they interrogate it. And so just through the interrogation method, accidentally releasing lists of clients or private or sensitive data. I think a lot of our clients are very concerned about that. They're concerned about how do we allow our employees to find benefit, right? And be able to use some of these new tools, and yet impress upon our employees or find a way to try to help to control is probably the wrong word, but educate our employees so that they don't inadvertently, introduce sensitive data into public LLMs through the interrogation method that they use, which is really easy to do. And most lay employees just don't recognize that that's what's happening when they interrogate. And so I think some organizations are looking at privatizing, frankly, not necessarily because they're trying to use their own data, at least not initially. More than anything, they're trying to keep their employees from inadvertently releasing data. So I think I'm seeing that even more up front than I am people saying, let's go create our own LLM. Now, there are others who are, yeah, let's go create our own LLM. We want to use AI more broadly than just generative, by the way. But it's a really good way for me to be able to use really massive information, but that's my information. And so I can draw my own insights from my own data that I don't necessarily want to release to the public. So I do think there's different use cases and different reasons why we see organizations coming to us and asking us the questions about how do I do both?
That's great. Yeah, I think that's a key component. Is there's lots of different unique questions that are being asked. So, if you're listening and have a question, certainly reach out to us. We're always curious to learn about what you're thinking about, what you're nervous about. Keish, we've got a great question coming in from the audience. You mentioned the extensive training for leadership, which is commendable. They asked a question regarding to how much is dedicated to ethical practices in data on that training. I didn't think of it. That's a great question.
So, there are multiple levels of thinking about it, right? So at one level, we think of it as, we think of the current Gen AI tools out there as a third-party product, right? So let's say if we are implementing SAP for a client, if SAP has IP violation, it's not really our problem, right? It's a third-party thing, right? So, it is really between the client and the SAP. It's SAP's biggest problem, but the least impact is ours. And we would, do SAP unless we know for sure. I'm using SAP as an example. No,
whatever.
Nothing intended against SAP but unless we know SAP is in the business of, violating IP consistently, which they're not. So the same, that's the first level of thinking about OpenAI, because, for sure there's already a plethora of lawsuits against, hey, you read my book, and, that's coming, right? But it's, it's innocent till proven otherwise. So right now it'll find its way to court eventually. So we're not kind of acting on that, right? But we are treating it like a third-party product, like SAP as an example, and say, hey, we're going to do what we have to do, and the product owner has to make sure that they are following, right? Now, the other part of ethics is to make sure that there is a structural compliance enabler to policies, right? So the point, Ola, you're making, hey, I can make a policy that you can't put my data out there, or you can't use somebody else's data, but how do you enforce that policy?
Yeah.
And a quick advertorial for Hexware. I think like the first thing that we are telling clients is we've got this secure architecture for you to use to enable all your employees to use the combined AI plus Gen AI capabilities. Ola, you're absolutely right. It's about AI plus Gen AI, right? I'll say 8% AI, 20% Gen AI right now.
Yep.
How do you do that securely is unless you are structurally able to enforce that, policies are useless. How do you there's no way for you to do that, right? So that's the first thing we're taking to market. Apart from saying, hey, whatever use cases you have, we'll solve for them. What we are telling them is, before you start doing that, please make sure you put this in place. A way for you to allow employees to do this safely and securely.
That's good.
That's
Keish,
great.
This has been a tremendous, Ola. I think this conversation could go easily
Go
an
on
hour.
for another hour. Go on for another hour. I agree.
But we ran out of time, and and great questions. I mean, Scott, even this gentleman commented just now is, building your own LLM and training it creates a moat around your business, and it's something to think about. So those are the differentiators we have to think about. But Keish, thank you so much for being the guest. We got to have you back, because I think there's more to discuss in this topic, and wish you much success as you go on this generative AI journey.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you, Ola.
Thank you.
Bye, Keish. Take care. Wow. Oh, what do you think?
It's awesome. And you know what I heard in that was maybe a little bit of threat, but it's
Yeah.
mostly thrive. It's how do we
Yeah.
thrive? There may be
Yeah.
some things we need to put around it to make that thriving safer, but I believe it's definitely leaning into the thrive. I love what Hexaware is doing with their employees and that they're starting with leadership. That is a commendable way to approach, and I
Yeah.
really love that.
Yeah. Leading from the top like that is great. How can you kind of get everybody on board unless you're doing it yourself? So lots to learn from what Keish and his leadership is doing at Hexaware. And Ola, wonderful seeing you. I don't know where you'll be next time we talk,
Who
but
knows?
can't wait for the conversation. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, John.
Bye bye. Take care, Ola.